So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Connecting the Commonwealth, Transportation in Virginia. It's a pleasure to have you here. I'm Supervisor Andrea, a member of the VACo board, and also I serve as the Vice Chair of your Health and Human Services Committee. So it's a pleasure to have you here. I'm glad you came to talk about transportation, something that is very, very necessary and important in our state. And so we're going to have a robust conversation with my colleagues. We're joined today with Mr. Phil North. Mr. North is the chair of the Roanoke County branch of supervisors, and I'm so glad that he's here because we're on the transportation committee together, and I've learned so much from him. In the Hollins district, and so he brings to us extensive experience with transportation relating to issues and programs and concerns with the state of Virginia. We're also joined by Mr. William McCarty. He is the supervisor for the Isle of Wight. Am I saying that?
Isle of Wight.
Of Wight, thank you. He can speak in reference to the Hampton Roads and the Tidewater priorities as it relates to transportation. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me this afternoon. I really appreciate it. So today, each panelist is going to have 5 to 10 minutes to kind of talk about their area, the things that they're experiencing in their areas, and as it relates to transportation priorities, not just in their area, but in the region, and what's going on as it relates to their counties and how it relates to the rest of our region here. Mr. North is going to start off, if you would, Mr. North. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yes.
There you go. Everybody hear me? Good. Anyway, thank you very much for coming, and I just want to start by saying I came from transportation, working in marketing and sales and operations with Norfolk Southern, which was a train company, if you will, but nevertheless transportation. One of the things I believe in, and the reason I do, is because we don't have a taxing authority in our part of the state. And so OPM, other people's money, that's our mantra at the county, but it's also our mantra on the Transportation Planning Organization and Roanoke Valley Allegheny region. Roanoke County gets 4 applications for Smart Scale every 2 years. The TPO for the region gets 4, and the Regional Commission gets 4. And so we don't get all 12 in Roanoke County, but we do compete for the projects with others in our region. And our region runs from Allegheny all the way down to Franklin County. So we have a pretty wide area in the Regional Commission. So what's going on in Roanoke County? Well, 81 is getting a lot of work done on it. It's driven down that part of the state from about exits 137, 150. There's going to be construction starting, finishing, and going on until probably the next 8 years. And it's very costly, and we appreciate the monies that have gone to 81 to widen it, because it can be dangerous, not only during construction, but it can be dangerous with two lanes, especially on Sunday night going north. There's more truckers than there are cars. And because of that, we welcome those improvements. And you may have heard it's $35 million a mile on one side of the road. So we'll have those projects completed hopefully by 2030, 2031. As far as passenger rail is concerned, we have 2 trains a day that run from Boston to Roanoke. One arrives about 1 o'clock every day, and then goes back that afternoon about 4:30. And then we have another train that arrives later in the evening about 10 o'clock and returns the next day about 6:30 in the morning. And those trains have exceeded all expectations on ridership. And believe you me, it's taken traffic off 81. Because when I go up to Alexandria, because I like to go up to that part of the country and visit, you don't have to worry about driving. And on 81 or 66, and so you feel safer and you can do other things on the train and enjoy the scenery. There is a plan to have another train, a third train added in the future, but we're going to extend the other two trains, the first two. They're going to eventually not stop at Roanoke and go on to Christiansburg, probably in the next 2 or 3 years. And so that's in the process of coming true. So back to smart scale. On the Route 460 corridor, which comes in from Lynchburg into Roanoke, there's been awarded about $43 million in projects. And that's both for the city of Roanoke, but also for the county. We realized very soon, in the last 6 years, it cost too much to put a third lane on each side because of the cost of land acquisition. So VDOT came up with R-cuts, which are supposed to reduce light sequencing from 4 sequences to 3, and R-cuts can also improve safety where there's been a large amount of accidents. So those are the things that we're dwelling on in Roanoke County at this time. Now, smart scale is, I think, in round 6. We'll know more about that in the outcome in January. But from what I understand, there's been fewer incomplete projects submitted this time, whereas in the past there have been a lot of incomplete projects submitted as placeholders that never got completed. But I think there's been fewer projects that have been submitted in this round so far. I can't remember those numbers, but someone was sharing that information with me the other day. I don't mean just the Roanoke area, I mean statewide. So I think people are getting more serious about what they submit, and they don't just submit a project and then try to file a complete application later on, which was one of the things VDOT wanted to change in round 6. Now, they didn't change the amount of applications. As I mentioned before, it's 4 for each entity, which is good, but we don't know what's going to happen in round 7. They might do something like reduce it from 4 to 3 in certain areas of the state, and that wouldn't help us at all. Of course, there's other ways you can get money through VDOT locally without going through smart scale. But one of the challenges we're facing is the budget doesn't seem to grow that much. And so we have a lot of housing projects that are being built in rural areas. And those roads have been there for, I don't know, 60, 70, 80 years. And so these are like rural roads where parts have line down the middle and some don't. So we're having to bear the cost as a county to improve those. For example, adding left turn lanes is about $5 million in one part of the county. And so what we're beginning to do is we're going to have to do some bonding of 2 or 3 improvements to complete the infrastructure to support the development of housing in Roanoke County. And this is something that's just come to be in our capital plan next year. So, having said that, I will share with you a couple of things in our area on the regional commission. We'd like to see a modernized secondary road funding formula that meets the needs of the rural area without taking money away from the smart scale pot of funds. We support targeted investments along the 220 corridor. The CTB just rescinded I-73, which has been a vision for 30 years. And now the Blue Ridge Innovation Corridor, known as BRIC, is going to be targeted as a solution to I-73 with improvements along the 220 corridor coming from North Carolina up to Roanoke and into Allegheny. And they are seeking funds this year in the General Assembly. Likely, I would predict they're going to have to do a study first, because everything starts with a study and then maybe you get funding. So I imagine they'll get some funding for a study. That area is critical to improving the business that traverses over that corridor, as well as Fralin Biomedical Center and Virginia Tech research, so that those entities can attract more people in and out of the area, and it will also improve the economy with industry that would locate through Franklin County, Roanoke, and other counties along 220. We'd also support, as a region, continued investment for Amtrak service airport investment is also something that's been on our minds. In fact, we're going to go to Raleigh next Monday to talk to the Raleigh Airport Authority and also the Business Alliance Group to see what their magic was to get funding from the federal government and the state. In the state, they have more money budgeted each year in North Carolina than Virginia. So we'd like to see that improve as well. So we're going to build the business case for the Roanoke Airport expansion. Norfolk Southern left Roanoke, Virginia years ago, went to Atlanta and Norfolk in large part because customers were complaining about traveling to and from Roanoke because they had to go through a terminal like Charlotte or Atlanta. And it became costly and time consuming for people to do business person to person. Same thing in our county agenda for airport expansion, as I just mentioned. And here's something too, if you ever want to get the attention of the General Assembly, you pass your resolution, and our attorney here, Peter Lubeck, came up with this card, and you can put it in your pocket. You go to Richmond, you can go visit your delegates, if you haven't already, before you left home, and give them this. And they really like that. In fact, it's spreading, I think this, a lot of other companies, counties have jumped on board with this concept. And I took it to the regional commission, now they're doing it too. And it just makes it a little bit easier. So, in summary, we support all improvements to transportation and rail and 81, but we have to be strategic about the projects we recommend every 2 years for Smart Scale. And we have to prioritize them, and we also rely on federal STBG monies that we get from the regional commission and also Smart Scale funds. And for the most part, we don't have to put up so much money out of the county's funds to improve our infrastructure and roadways. So that's about it.
Well, thank you, Supervisor North. Well, I tell you, he's told us about the Southwest. Now we're going to segue over to the Isle of Wight and the Hampton Roads area, Tidewater. And Supervisor McCarty, if you can tell us what's happening in the Isle of Wight, and also just highlight for us the money that's you've secured with the HRTPO and the HRTAC, is it?
Sure,
HRTAC?
yeah.
How does that help your region?
Well, first of all, so a couple of years ago I was elected the chair of our 17 regions for our transportation planning organization. I will tell you it has been steadily like drinking out of a fire hydrant, not a hose, but a hydrant. And what we are finding is that transportation is a detrimental issue in our region. I know it's that way, it seems, in every area, particularly when we deal with the infamous VDOT mechanism. Just a couple of things on our region with our 17 localities. We have the HRTPO, which is the Hampton Roads Transportation Planning Organization. Then we have our Hampton Roads Transportation Accountability Commission, and I serve on both of those. One manages the money, the other one manages the projects. And just to let you know, the TPO and the TAC for us have been a game changer in Hampton Roads. We had an over 20-year backlog of transportation projects that affected our region, that affected the commerce, economic development, projects that VDOT said they could not cover in 100 years of planning. So what our region did, just as a kind of 30,000-foot view, the state legislature allowed for us to vote, in essence, to tax ourselves 0.7% that have designated monies that go towards the bond, if you will, to fund the project. So to give you an idea, currently we have $5.3 billion worth of projects in tow. You may have seen we are completing it's a pretty extensive list. We're widening the 64 Peninsula segments 1, 2, and 3. The projected cost there for 21 miles was $515 million. 294 million of that are direct funds from our region. The other 221 million is a combination of federal and state funds. Okay, we've got things like the regional connector study. interesting about study, Supervisor North mentioned it, studies are not cheap, and it seems like the different levels of studies you do, the more they cost. One connector study is $7 million for our region. $7 million. That's stupid. Sorry to not come up with a craftier word for you, but oftentimes this stuff is it makes my face hurt, some of the stuff that we end up having to do because of VDOT's requirements for studying. Our 664 widening and Bower Hills interchange, for the study of that, the study, $11.9 million. Did you hear the word study? Yes, that's a problem. Those things are heavy funding issues for us. The only problem with that particular one is because of VDOT constraints and the changes in the Smart Scale program and how they did certain aspects of our roads. In 2018, which is not too terribly long ago, the study was halted even though we had front-funded quite a bit of the study's funds. So we've had some interesting chats with VDOT. Matter of fact, Shep Miller was at one of our regional meetings and he was presenting, and he said, well, that's all I have, Mr. Chairman. Is there anything else? I said, yes, I want to ask you a question, sir. We're told that all the VDOT projects haven't been fully paid for in the Commonwealth. We're touting a $5 billion surplus then. How do we have a surplus when the state hasn't paid all the bills? Billy Kiger, one of our VACo members, of course, says that all the time. So transportation oftentimes goes to the bottom of the list, or at least it seems that way. Our ports are growing in Hampton Roads. We have now one of the very few double-lane deep port, is what I call it, where two large deep ships can traverse through our region, and it's helping our local and even our state economy in a very significant way. So a lot of projects that we've done, $5.3 billion worth of projects that the state is not funding. 92% of the $5.3 billion worth of projects that we are doing right now in our region is funded by our 17 localities. What do you think about that? State and federal monies make up 8% of the total funding mechanism of what's going on in our region. That's huge, but that's frightening and it's alarming. One of the things that VDOT wanted to do, because they saw that we had managed their funds very well, VDOT wanted to dip into the pot of money to provide maintenance for trestles in our region that should have been a part of VDOT's maintenance program, but nonetheless, that was an interesting fight that we had at the HR TAC level. We hear the term Smart Scale all the time. I would probably term it something else because of the way it's changed over the years. Probably be termed better maybe as like a dumb scale type thing, because I'm not so sure it's smart. When they changed all of the various components of it, many projects in our own county and region fell to the bottom of the list, while other ones were tipped up a little bit higher. So think about Smart Scale just for a moment. The total funding that was allocated in 2017 was $1.7 billion, $7.5 billion worth of requests. The next year, 2018, round two, $1.1 billion was allocated with $8.6 billion worth of funding request. In 2020, they decided to get smart about it. They decreased it further to $900 million of funds with $7.5 billion worth of requests. In 2022, there were $6.3 billion worth of requests and only $1.4 billion allocated. Everyone in this room knows that transportation funding and what it's able to provide shrinks every year. So a project that used to cost, I don't know, $100 million is now approaching $200 million for the same exact project. Round 5, 2024, which went through that, $8.3 billion worth of projects. And guess what they gave? $1.6 billion towards the projects. The point in sharing that with you is that VDOT's model, currently with Smart Scale and all their funding mechanisms, fall woefully short for meeting the state's needs, particularly throughout counties and regions that have growing transportation needs, growing infrastructure needs. So our region is trying to be very proactive in that. Right now, they estimate round 6 is going to have about $7.5 billion worth of submissions, and guess how much money they're going to be allocating? Well, they don't know either. So just kind of keep that in mind. They don't know what they're going to be allocating. To give you an idea from a district level, with all the smart scale requests this last year, the applications by request, over half of the requests came from 2 areas in the state, Northern Virginia and Richmond. The rest of the state, the other districts, 2, 4, 6, 8, the other 8 districts came in substantially lower. So there's a lot of needs all over the place. One of the things that we are teeing up for our region, and I actually am doing the presentation next week to our elected body, is, and I know this is probably maybe a bomb to drop to you to think about, but we want to ask the state, and I don't like talking about this, I don't like tax increases just to increase them, but we want to ask the state to grant our region the permission to take us from 0.7% to a full percent. Why? Because our primary, Supervisor North mentioned primary, secondary roads just a moment ago. Our primary, secondary roads are not even on the forefront of any smart scale funding in the near future. However, through our Executive Director, Kevin Page, we have come up with a plan, and we've put together a financial mechanism that, and here's what it shows. In the next 8 to 10 years, if the state were to allow our region to do that extra 3/10, we would be able to fully fund the bonding mechanism and fund the debt that it takes to do all the road projects that VDOT says in their next 50 to 100-year plan they cannot cover. So, Hampton Roads Transportation Planning Organization, our Accountability Commission, we continue to prove that we can do things a little bit better and maybe even smarter than what some of the folks that are the powers that be. And I believe, let me drop this other bomb because I could talk all day long. I like talking to people. I believe that the entire structure of VDOT needs to be overhauled. I think everything at VDOT needs to be overhauled. Probably not going to be a fun subject, especially if you work for VDOT. Might make you mad a little bit, but you know what? If something doesn't, the government's the only thing that I know of that when something doesn't work, they give it more money. I don't understand that. When I was growing up, my granddad coined the phrase, "Son, that's stupid." So I believe that we need to look at ways to maybe rehab some things in our state that continue to have a lack of return on investment. I know that sounds critical, but that's our experience. Every time we have a road issue in our localities, we've got a new road going in. It's a Nike Park Road extended to Route 17. We had to come up with almost $2 million in local money because VDOT fell short of meeting the contracts, and that was dropped on us very late in the game. So a lot of interesting, fun things, but I believe there has to be something done to address these things. It's a hard conversation. Perhaps VACo needs to have the conversation and start to take the lead on rehabilitating a process and program that for years has needed to be changed. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. So ladies and gentlemen, we've taken you southwest, we've taken you to Hampton Roads, now we're going to take you to Northern Virginia. And I'm going to give you a snapshot of what's going on in Northern Virginia. And then we're going to get into some questions. Is that fair? All right. So, just a snapshot. In 2019, there was a call to action from the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority for 24 and 25 about projects that needed to be addressed in Northern Virginia. And so, as a result of that, 13 Northern Virginia jurisdictions and agencies submitted 46 applications to Northern Virginia Transportation Authority for funding consideration. To that, with a combined request of approximately $1.7 billion. Northern Virginia Transportation Authority expects to allocate $400 million to those jurisdictions, which are comprised of counties like Arlington, Fairfax, Loudoun, and of course Prince William County. The cities that encompasses those jurisdictions are Alexandria, Fairfax, Falls Church, and the towns like in my district, Dumfries, Leesburg, Vienna. And then it also included DRPT, and then the regional agencies such as the Nova Parks and VRE. So to a total of 46 projects that were submitted, $1.7 billion. Now, regional impacts, where were they focusing? Focusing on road, rail, and transit, Route 1 and VRE, Fredericksburg, and on that line and that corridor. Continue to emphasize on the Fairfax County Parkway corridor, so that's Northern Virginia as well, going from I-95, our favorite highway. Well, you know, in terms of congestion, I know, that's our favorite highway, to the Fairfax County Parkway. And then continued emphasis on the bus rapid transit solutions. Synergies with Crystal City and Western Falls Church, increased focus on the grid network solutions, and then increased focus on active transportation solutions, such as bike and pedestrian facilities. Now let's look at the VRE proposed budget. That budget was and revenue, $14 million, with operating expenses of $9.4 million and the CIP and other expenditures of $4.5 million. So what projects did we focus on? Please excuse me. Development such as the New York Avenue Midway Storage Facility, Manassas, Batlick Road, which encompasses Springfield, that area, Woodbridge, which is down in the Prince William County area, Ripon Station improvements, Leland Road, all of these are in Prince William County, Brook Station improvements, and L'Enfant Plaza, which is in D.C. Construction in Manassas Park and Quantico Station, which is in the Potomac District, my district. Final designs on Broad Run expansion and Potomac Shores, which is one of the newer districts in newer areas in Prince William County. Franconia Springfield Station, Crystal City Station, Alexandria, which is in your district, I think, in your district. Now, another opportunity in transportation is the PRTC OmniRide area, which focuses on public transportation agencies that goes across the Northern Virginia region in an area known as where there's worse congestion on 95. So OmniRide, our bus system, provides that service in that regard. So that servicing encompasses Prince William County, Manassas, Manassas Park, Stafford, Fredericksburg, and Spotsylvania. Now, projected revenue for that area, $10.4 million increase for 2024-25. $10.3 million, and that encompasses the COVID recovery funds for 2024. $11.6 million jurisdictional subsidy request. And, of course, state grants and federal grants and passenger appropriations as well. So, with all of that we've kind of highlighted for you today, we're going to get into some questions. Is that fair? Let's talk about this. Transportation and economic development. What does your local road network and transportation system mean to your local economy? Any specific examples that you might want to share with us?
In the Highlands District of Roanoke County, it's the largest business corridor. It's just off 81. There's businesses like Elbit, Wells Fargo, Double Envelope, to name a few. And this is the largest concentration of business employment in the county. So, over the last 10 years, we've made some improvements not only with walkability, sidewalks, crosswalks, to improve safety and fluidity. And when it came time for Wells Fargo to make a decision to move out of Roanoke or to stay in Roanoke, to attract 1,200 new jobs, that was one of the criteria, was the location and the improved fluidity, never mind the fact you got to have a workforce for those new jobs in case people don't come from other parts of the country. So there was just one example where those investments paid off. You can't have transportation without economic development. You got to, they go hand in hand. It's just that simple, and that was just one small example. The same is true as I mentioned about the airport. You have to have a safe airport. Today, Roanoke's airport has an exemption from the FAA because of its approach landings and takeoffs. Many other airports have the same thing. So we need to fix that, never mind extend the runway. You know how much it's going to cost? Upwards almost to $500 million to do so. And 90% of that's federal money, 8% state, 2% local dollars. So that will pay off in economic development if those improvements are made at the airport. So just a couple of examples. Where you can attract business with improvements. The 220 corridor I mentioned is going to be the same thing because it has more curves in it than you can imagine. Between 10 miles just outside of Roanoke to Rocky Mountain. And that's going to be a challenge, but it's going to improve the traffic. Industries don't want to locate plants, warehouses, whatever, along a corridor that doesn't have safe movability, if you will. And so, which comes first, the chicken or the egg? Well, the businesses aren't going to come as fluidly as they would if they saw improvements in the transportation network. I'll just say this. We've been asked, well, why don't you get a transportation report? Well, what are we going to do? Toll 460 between Lynchburg and Roanoke? I don't think so. Most of the money the state's given us, giving the areas going to I-81 to improve what has been something that should have been dealt with 20 years ago. So, and most of the local gas stations already have a tax, an I-81 gas tax, to fund I-81 in part. So, we have to be conservative and play the game of using other people's money. And that we play that by using federal money to leverage state funds. And, but yes, you can't build new neighborhoods without improved roadways. And those in large part are going to follow the localities because VDOT doesn't have any money. So one of the things we're going to be looking at is, well, let VDOT give us permission to manage the project construction ourselves. We probably can do it cheaper, more efficient, and get it done sooner, as William mentioned in his area.
So let me just share this with you, William. We've just had a new casino built in my district, and you talk about opportunities for jobs, but opportunities for also revisions in transportation, and how that can affect the community. Talk a little bit about Hampton Roads and how that segues into your economy.
So Hampton Roads is an interesting, I'll say a hybrid model. We have the 460 corridor where we're connected to the ports, it runs through Suffolk. We have a lot of warehousing projects that are coming online there. So transportation for us, I always tell folks when they say, what are your 4 areas in elected capacity that have those impacts, they're the biggest impacts? And I say, well, education is everybody's top, they talk about that, public safety. But in those is transportation and economic development. You don't have any growth in the community, and we've had citizens tell us, well, we don't want our intermodal parks to grow. We don't want to just shut the doors off to everybody. And I had one citizen say, well, how do we make this, how do we keep the county from growing? I said, make it a county that nobody wants to live in, and then nobody's going to be here. Well, the problem with that is everything would go down economically. We wouldn't be able to afford our roads. Now, one of the difficult things in Hampton Roads, and I know it's I know everyone in this room would love to drive through the toll booths. I'm joking. I have an easy pass in my truck, and it is constantly, I'm sure, cha-chinging, 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 because no one gets any kind of discounted rate or anything like that as far as that goes. But that's a part of our funding mechanism. Without fixing our roads, that's a whole other thing. It's not just developing roads and keeping the arteries in our region moving. It's also providing the repair mechanisms to keep the roads from blowing your tires out. And one of the things that we haven't even talked about in our region yet is the James River Bridge that's much older than I am, and they don't have a plan to replace that bridge within 100 or more years. It's not even in their forecast because the cost is going to be astronomical. So the roadways, without them, everybody in this room knows, without proper roads, your economic development, transportation affects everything. It affects education, it affects public safety, housing, all of that. it has grave impacts. So without having the hard conversations, our communities get set aside.
Thank you so much, gentlemen, and I totally agree with your assessment of that. There are areas that we oftentimes don't focus on when we're talking about transportation, when we're talking about the studies that you've mentioned. And so we don't do it in an all-encompassing way. I want to focus on the urban and the rural challenges that come about when we have to make these very important decisions. Both urban, suburban, and rural localities face unique challenges surrounding transportation and infrastructure. How do we face and overcome these challenges? What are your recommendations? How do we partner together on all ends of the state of Virginia to make sure that our citizens are the good recipients of these studies and where we live?
Okay. Great question. 2018, I came on board as a supervisor. And right off the bat, I got put on transportation committees, transportation steering committee here at VACo as chair, vice chair. One night in Richmond, Lane Strickland, who was the chair, the executive director of the regional commission, came in and I said, hey, I got an idea. So I took a napkin and drew the state of Virginia and said, if we could just divide the state of Virginia down the Shenandoah Valley, I-81, everything east, for the most part, gets funded with the taxing authorities. Ours would not. And taking out 81 from consideration, I'm talking about the counties. And I said, you take the budget for transportation and you add some more money to it, and you allocate 2 pots of money, and 1 year after state goes after smart scale projects and competes with each other, and then the next year, the other half of the state, mostly rural with some urban, up and down the 81 corridor, competes for the second pot of money. Now notice I said you add money to the total budget and you decide some fair way of dividing the pot. Then we, the rural areas, or the urban areas along the 81 corridor, won't be competing with the larger areas that have transportation authorities. And it would probably give us a better position to get funds all up and down the 81 corridor. So the delegate I spoke to later, Delegate McNamara, took it and went to the former Transportation Committee chair, and they talked about it because this person didn't get reelected, but he had a lot of ideas similar to this. And Delegate McNamara said, it won't pass. It just won't pass. Well, I don't take no for an answer from anybody. One of these days, someone's going to figure that out perhaps, and it'll happen. Aside from that concept, we need more money in transportation. It's that simple. You go to North Carolina, and it's like you went in another world. You cross over the Virginia line, going into the Greensboro, High Point, Triad, Winston-Salem area. They got roads that move traffic fluidly. Now, it took them a number of years to get that money, and in large part, it was bonded money. And yeah, you got to pay it back. But there was also some federal money that was put in there as well. One of our VDOT executives in the state of Virginia, and I won't name who it is, came from North Carolina and worked in transportation in the North Carolina Department of Transportation. And he'll tell you unashamedly, that's how they did what they did in North Carolina. Now, we can keep on with the same amount of money, maybe 2% more 1 year, 3, 4, but if we don't get real, okay, because the rural areas of the state can't have taxing authorities very easily, because what are you going to tax other than the gas pump? Well, guess what? You know, we probably, and I'm repeating some of what Terry Austin told us yesterday at the Transportation Steering Committee, there's only so many dollars, because we were asking him to try to improve secondary road funding, and he has to find a revenue source. And if he doesn't find the revenue source, he's going to take the money out of another pot of money that we probably don't want him to, because then it's going to shortchange us someplace else. And it becomes a chicken and egg type thing. So we gotta get real. And if we don't do more, it's gonna get even more costly as the time goes by because of inflation. And I hope one day, we got a lot of needs. We got education needs that seem to be #1 right now in some of the meetings I've been to. And I'm a supporter of education as well, but transportation and economic development go hand in hand. And we just got to figure out a way to get more money for transportation. And I think if people could see benefit from it, they'd go along with it. I'm getting people complaining about what we're doing along 460, and because it's going to take 6 years after we got the money awarded to even get the engineering and construction started. Well, as soon as that's done, with all the apartments and building and subdivisions, this is going to mean more people on the road. And to go 6 miles downtown in Roanoke, I used to get on 460 in my neighborhood, go right down about a half mile, make a left turn, and whip through neighborhoods and through southeast Roanoke to get to the office in 20 minutes, because if you stay on 460, you're going to be looking at probably 30 or 35 minutes. And one day, when the Blue Ridge Parkway was closed, it took 45 minutes to go across town. And it was because that's really our bypass, and it's not supposed to be a bypass. It's not supposed to be. So, as a matter of fact, outside of the Fairfax, Loudon areas, Prince William, Warrington, Virginia has a bypass. Charlottesville had a bypass years ago, before I ever learned to drive. Lynchburg's got a bypass. They had a lot of money put around Lynchburg. Roanoke does not. And in part, I learned that the citizens didn't want the bypass. Well, now they're living in the pain that I'm referring to. If you don't correct things in a strategic way and plan, it's all going to catch up to you.
Thank you, Phil, I agree. What do you think, Supervisor?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that the state can do is listen to the local elected officials, and I think in order for them to get a better pulse of the citizens, so right now, and I think everybody in the room knows this, they'll hold a public hearing for VDOT's 10-year plan, 5-year plan, whatever plan they're working on. They'll hold it at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and advertise it in a paper hidden in the little classified ads in the back. You cannot engage, but that's purposeful disengagement. People are at work at that time of day, they can't. So I've actually recommended, and just fell on deaf ears, but they have to start listening to the local elected officials. And here's the thing, in our community, in our region, and I think this could be said about a lot of our regions, we can do it. We should not be penalized for being able to do a better job. We should not be penalized because we can manage the money better, have the projects come in under. One project we just managed, our staff managed, a small staff managed a project in our county, and it was one of the few that VDOT said, oh, that came in under budget. Well, maybe that's telling us something, but if you ignore the realities in front of you, if regions and localities can do it better, more efficiently, manage the monies better for transportation, that's why I'm saying the model has to change. Right now, counties and cities, well, counties versus cities and towns, they're legislated differently. Everyone here knows that. Transportation is funded differently. Roads are managed differently. Maintenance managed completely differently. If a citizen calls VDOT and says, I have a problem with the road, they tell them, call your local board of supervisors. They call us and we're like, you were told what? So we tell them, folks, we have no control over the roads because VDOT lets us know very succinctly that we have no authority over the roads, but yet whenever we're able to manage it better, there always seems to be a clawback on certain funding mechanisms. So they need to listen to the local bodies. They need to meet regularly, not just we have our top VDOT engineer that's over the Hampton Roads residency, or the Hampton Roads district, pardon me. They're part of our regional meetings. And I've told him, you guys need to do more than just show up to these meetings, because honestly, all the mayors and everybody sitting in this meeting are trying to blow in, blow up, and blow out. Go meet with the local delegations, listen to the local leaders. They know their roads best, they know their needs best, many of them have comprehensive plans and things like that. So if that's part of the whole model that I'm saying is insufficient right now, because a lot of our staff and our own engineers in-house can help make these projects a little bit more efficient, maybe even push them forward in a more succinct fashion. And I'll say this, I may not be something that the folks in Roanoke want to hear, and I contribute to that gas tax a lot. I drive up there many, many times, sometimes monthly. So I'm a contributor, absolutely. But one of the bombs that may have to be dropped in that region is this idea of tolls. And I know it's not fun because we got raked over the coals, but now that we're able to partner with the building of our bridges and tunnels in a way that the federal government and the state government couldn't do, and it's bolstering our local economy. Yes, it was costly. Yes, it was inconvenient, but it was a conversation that was needed. And the last thing I'll say on it, one of the other problems that we run into is if a region comes up with a good idea. I'll give you, for instance, not that it's a novel idea, but let's say that the state says, okay, you guys can do the extra 0.3%, hypothetically. Well, there's also now been some scuttle around that the state legislators are saying, if we allow them to do that, we'd like to take 2/3 of that and apply it to this relief, this relief, this relief, this relief, this program, that program, to where instead of it being 0.3%, it's like 1/100% that's left for our region, of which we would not be able to take care of the transportation needs. So, listen to the localities, partner with them. Instead of acting like you're smarter, realize you're not, and partner better.
Let me just add something. Talk about the legislators. So I was with one the other day. He's been in the assembly for a year. It's his second year coming up. He's going to help us on some other projects. But he every time we see him, he says, you know, I don't ever get any calls about any problems. All the supervisors, I said, y'all get hit with all the problems and all the things. Yeah, that's right. Well, you know what? I'm not trying to be vindictive, but I think more of our state delegates and senators need to start getting some of these calls from citizens and organizations and tell them about transportation. But if it wasn't for Terry Alston in the Roanoke region, who was the transportation chair, now he's on the committee, but he wasn't chair, and he's on appropriations, we wouldn't probably gotten anything. It's that simple. You got to have someone who's a statesman who's going to advocate for the region. And sometimes you're lucky to have someone like that, sometimes you're not. And at the end of the day, with population growth, it's like I'm saying, it's all going to come to fruition one day. Everybody's going to be standing there saying, gee, we got a problem. So you either get ahead of the problem and be proactive, or you're going to be reactive when the time comes. And when people start saying, I'm not moving there, that place is a mess.
So what I hear you saying, gentlemen, is that the needs are different, first of all, and the supervisors, the local and county officials are the subject matter experts, because we understand the needs in the community and what that looks like. But I also hear you saying the collaboration that needs to be between our statesmen and us. There needs to be more collaboration. So can we dig a little bit deeper? Let's talk about what are we missing in terms of addressing in our transportation needs. I know certainly in the northern corridor, there are things that we're dealing with, like stormwater management. We're dealing with that. We're dealing with having ample provisions for our senior citizens and their transportation needs. Let's talk about even more so what concerns, and even if it relates to funding, what type of projects secondarily are we missing that we haven't addressed already? We know what the surface responsibilities are, but what's deeper that we've not addressed in transportation? I'll start with you.
Well, we don't have bus service in the county. People are beginning to ask for that. The cost is $1.5 million round. So if you put two, you've got to have $3 million in the budget then every year after. So that's a challenge. And so what we've looked at is micro-transit, where you have smaller vehicles that might operate in the morning and the evening during the business hours. We also have Cortran, which is, we did get funding from that from the state to provide folks that don't drive a way to get to and from the grocery store and or doctor's appointments, if you will. And that's addressed it on a more economical basis because we put in some money and then the state has a grant program. But there's no grant program that we run across for bus service. We don't want a lot of our buses riding empty. That's no good. So maybe you do it in the morning or you do it in the evening. I know if I'm going up and going to Virginia, they have like the Fairfax connector that connects to the main bus service around the area. So, and that's kind of a micro-transit type operation. So you have to plan for that. So that's something we're trying to do, but again, you just can't get hit with, you know, a prescription program that's a federal mandate, and how you provide prescription medicines when you are in the fire rescue service. I heard one county today, Prince William, said it's cost y'all $3 million already. So we operate on about a $270 million budget, of which we then turn around and give $100 million to the schools, and we then have less money to operate the rest of the county after passing on to education than the education system has, because they get money from the state. Okay, we don't get any money from the state. Our money comes from our local body and taxpayers. So it is what it is. $3 million is, to some other locality, $30 million when it comes to our community. So, but getting to the real issue, you're never going to have enough money, but if you don't increase the money you got over time, and I'll give you one more thing I learned, and I shared this with James. A bill for secondary for unpaved roads, I think it was, a factor was put in the legislation at $425 a mile in 2001. It hasn't been touched for inflation at all. And you bring it up today, well, I don't know where we're going to find the money from. We're going to have to take it from someplace else. So, you know, when they put factors in place and then they don't keep up with inflation, every 5 years you take a look at it, it comes back to haunt you. So it's going to happen in a bigger way if we don't address some of these needs now.
William, do you have comments on that?
I always have comments. So just kind of back up just for a moment. So one of the other things in where regions and localities are penalized, if we begin to do things at a more efficient level, certain things like what Phil just mentioned maybe don't get put up in the front of the model as urgently as they could or should, because they say, why address an inflation model to do that when they seem to be getting along okay? And one of the challenges is we can't back off of doing things efficiently and effectively because our citizens rely on it. I'll give you a couple for instance. Isle of Wight County is a part of another regional conglomerate. It's the Southeastern Services of Virginia, which is for our seniors. And so we provide transit service for our seniors in the southeastern region. And this last year, it was Isle of Wight County's turn to provide the grant funds to buy another passenger bus. Nice, it was about $100,000. And so we have partnered. So we just bought this one. Suffolk has bought a few of them. Franklin, Southampton has bought some other ones. And so there's a network in our area to help provide, you know, transportation needs for our seniors. But again, some of the secondary roads that we have are in such disrepair that the roads to large vehicles like that become a little bit treacherous to navigate, even with a skilled provider or driver. So that prevents some, or provides some further challenges. One of the things that I think needs to happen, and that I think our state legislators would be well advised, is if they could go and have a joint meeting with we're asking for ours to start doing it with us in Isle of Wight. Have a joint, maybe some of you do this and that's great. If so, tell me how it works or what can be done better. Have a joint meeting with our state legislators where we invite the citizens to come and talk, share different things, almost similar to a public hearing, but you don't call it a public hearing, so that they can hear some of these issues that we're dealing with, because we as localities cannot single-handedly leverage VDOT or any subsidiary therein. We have to have the support of our state legislators. But the interesting construct that I was shared with 2 years ago, and I won't say who they are, they may or may not still be in a position of power in VDOT, but they said, quote, "Not even the state legislators get to tell us what to do. We are a separate political subdivision of the Commonwealth of Virginia, and we answer only to the governor." That is what was told to me in a separate meeting, and I thought, boy, I wish I'd have had my recording device out for that. So I know all things point back to that, but there are ways that our localities can be collaborative with other adjoining systems and localities and solve some of the problems. But again, we can't be penalized when we solve them. If you do something well, it should be celebrated, not looked at in ways, ooh, let's figure out another way we can take away from that region or locality.
Thank you. So one of the things that you mentioned here was microtransit. And in Northern Virginia, that's really an opportunity when you talk about multimodal that we're taking advantage of, particularly with our senior citizens, and it's working. But again, the funding is not there for it, so that's another opportunity for us. But I want to segue into another area before we go into the audience, because I know you have absolutely great questions to ask. But I want to segue into passenger and freight rail. Now, one of the things that COG, Council of Government, is doing right now, partnering with McCarty, they've launched a historic initiative that is called DMV Moves, and I know you've heard of that already, to create a unified vision for sustainable funding model and public transit, which is going to cost a lot of money. It's going to cost a lot of money. But passenger and freight rail must be included when we're discussing transportation initiatives in the Commonwealth. So let's talk about that a little bit. What's the future, do you think, of the rail and its implication as it relates to traffic and trade and, the improvement that's here in Virginia? What does that look like for you?
Thank you. Having come to the rail industry, I can tell you, I grew up riding passenger trains. Yep. And so, isn't it interesting, after all the passenger train network began to dissolve, that, and most of it was long distance when Amtrak took over. Long distance trains in the country don't make money. Wick Mormon, chairman of Roanoke Southern, retired to Charlottesville, and I was on the train one day when he got on with Mark Mannion, who was working at Amtrak with Wick to measure the profitability of long distance trains. They just simply can't break even. So, what does work? And it's the regional trains that have been born out of the Department of Rail and Public Transportation for Virginia. And down south, Norfolk Southern is being accused of holding up passenger trains because they're running, dedicated time freight trains, and the passenger trains have to set. And the train coming out of New Orleans can be as much as 4 to 8 hours late some days. These regional trains, for the most part, run pretty well on short distances like Roanoke to Alexandria and are very timely. I will tell you this, I think that you're going to see a train one day from probably Newport News, Richmond to Roanoke. And in fact, even one legislator said he'll take it to and from the Capitol when they're in session rather than have to drive. And it'll work out nice. But I will tell you, I'm gonna think we're gonna see more regional, short distance passenger service in the state of Virginia. Coming from Newport News up to Alexandria, you do that today. And the corridor, where they're building the second bridge that Virginia was insightful enough to work out, is going to relieve some of the congestion between going to and fro the northeast with rail traffic. Long bridge. And that's going to take a while to build, but that's been needed, especially now we have more passenger rail service. So I see it as a benefit to the transportation freight trains, but also to the regional passenger trains. They'll have more room to navigate. Plus, the state's going to own the track all the way to Manassas, I believe it is.
Yes.
And I think you're going to see some more of that later on. In fact, there was some property that was purchased for the Christiansburg train, and they couldn't get through the tunnel because the tunnel didn't meet current safety conditions, so they gave that back to Norfolk Southern, and they worked out another arrangement to get to Christiansburg a lot sooner without rebuilding a tunnel that's been there for, over 100 years. So, yeah, you're going to see more of it, and on beyond to Bristol, you're going to see that improve as well, too, because that's largely single track. They're going to have to put some additional track to allow for either freight trains to be held for passenger or passenger for freight. And so I see it as a metamorphosis, the rail service declined, and now it's coming back. It's like the baseball team left Washington in 1971, and now they're back. They went away, but they came back. So it's funny how history repeats itself. But I think that it's all going to be the best.
So I don't know a whole lot. I would defer probably a lot of the rail to Phil, but our local area, we have the rail that comes through from the port, and so that's pretty active in our area. I think we will see more rail service, passenger service. I would love to be on a train to go to different places. Short stints would be great. My wife and I did look at taking a train to another area, and it would take 9 hours for me to drive there, but 23 and a half hours to ride the train. So that was a little puzzling to me. Not so sure that we would do that, but I do think that will continue to rise in need and use.
I do too. I'm on the board for VRE, and it has really been an advantage in Northern Virginia for us, just moving around the region, but not only in Northern Virginia, but going back and forth to DC. But the question is, and the puzzling part is the ridership, because people are not wanting to go back in the office. They're working from home. That is an opportunity when you look at rail service and how do we utilize it. Long Branch is a saving grace for the region, but again, working from home is a challenge. That's a challenge. So let's go into the nitty-gritty part, and then we're going to go to the audience. So get your questions ready. We got 5 minutes to go. Okay, so why don't we just go to the audience? Let's segue to the audience. Are there questions? I'm going to start on this side, and then I'm going to move this way. Any questions from this side of the room for the panel? Couple questions. Oh, you have a question, Jake? Please.
It's just more of a, if you could wave a wand and pass any sort of enabling legislation to help you achieve your local transportation goals and or regional goals, what would that legislation be? Basically, what's the biggest hurdle to you guys meeting your own local transportation needs?
Yeah, that's a really loaded question, but if I had a magic wand and I waved it, the thing that would change is that the regions and localities would be empowered with the state money so that the overhead of VDOT didn't come into the question, and we would have more money to do transportation projects. So I don't multiple points in the wave of the wand, but it would be removing certain bureaucratic levels and having the funding go directly to regions and localities that are doing transportation efficiently and quicker.
Can we have three?
3 waves.
Yeah.
If I had to wave my magic wand, you're probably going to know what I want to say, is we would increase the biennium budget in transportation, and you do it over phases. And I would tell you this, even before that, I'd go back and revisit that strategy of splitting the state in two so that you can maybe do more with the money you got and maybe add a little to the pot. I think that's worth looking into now. They'll people say, oh no, we can't do that because that's every year, not every 2 years. Yeah, you can do it. There's nothing you can't do. I think that was Reginald.
So, I'll answer and then I'll pass. I'm sorry.
She may want to ask a question.
Okay?
Yes, so, thank you. The Transportation Committee,
I can't hear you. Can't you say?
on the Transportation Committee, for the Transportation Committee resolutions, what are priorities? What did you have, because I haven't seen those. What are the Transportation Committee resolution or priorities?
The steering committee.
Yes,
The VACo steering committee.
yes, sir.
Yes.
So, if you would, James.
Yeah, absolutely. For right now, it's funding. Transportation funding is our overarching priority. There's many different subsets of that funding, but it's things like secondary road funding, unpaved roads without impacting current funding that we all rely on. Transit funding, streamlining smart scale. Funding, I don't know if you've heard Phil talk at all this evening, but funding is one of the most important thing that we find. We also have a sub-priority statement that's local and state cooperation. As you've heard Mr. McCarty here talk, coordination with VDOT can be a little challenging.
Yes.
And so I think the reason we elevated it to the priority position is because we've heard instances of VDOT repaving, resurfacing a road, and no coordination with the local government, and so they'll pave right over a manhole cover, and they'll cover up sewer lines, utility coordination. So right now it's funding and VDOT local state coordination is our priority statement.
Okay, thank you for that. So may I ask, since this is related, you brought up the 2001 legislation for the secondary roads, that's at 425 per mile or something like that. Is that being addressed in there?
Not specifically, but it is on secondary and non-paved roads. When we ask for more funding, that's not saying you're going to increase the factor that was established by legislation, but that's one way of doing it.
Yes, that's my point. So in terms of leverage, just to point out that 2001 was when that amount was set.
That's a great point. And so one of the parts that has to, even if they do 2 or 3% in additional funding every year in transportation, there's no way to keep up with the curve. Studies are showing 12 to 15% rising in cost of materials, labor, maintenance, all that kind of stuff. So even a 2 to 3 or 4% increase in funding, it doesn't keep up.
That factor at 425, if you put it in an inflation calculator, it ought to go up to around $700 some dollars.
Right.
Well, nobody is going to say it's got to be that way or else. You just got to work. You just got to do something to keep moving it along because it's so far behind inflation. It's crazy. No one's going to ask for 75% more money. I think that's what it would amount to, which would be about, I don't know, $25 million, something like that. So you're not going to ask for that, but you got to do something.
Right, but I thought that was a powerful statement to make, the 2001 date, because I think our legislators need to be acutely aware of that. So,
Yeah,
because it
agree.
always sounds like just asking for more money, but this is, a very significant justification.
Now, they'll tell you, well, we can get the money, but we don't have a revenue source, so we'll take it from another pot.
Yeah.
No, that's not what we're asking. We have established by legislation, and it hasn't been maintained every 5 years like it should be. And that's where James, who gets paid the big bucks, can go stand before transportation and take some of us with him and just lay it on the table.
Yeah.
Okay, we have 1/3 of the General Assembly that's brand new. They don't know a lot of this stuff.
Right.
It's up to us to point some of these out because that's our job. That's our job to advocate.
So, big problems, but we need you all to help us to talk to our General Assembly. We need more funding, but also we need a lot more collaboration. So we thank you for participating this afternoon. We have to cut it a little short, but please, if you would send your concerns and your input to the Transportation Committee at VACo, and I guarantee you we'll be there to represent you as long as you lock arms with us to represent you. So thank you. Thank you so much for joining us.